Hey everyone, this is Mason Hutchison, and you're listening to Herb Rally, your daily herbal podcast. We come out with new episodes about 5 days a week, so be sure to tune in often. Our goal for the show is to help you along your herbalist journey no matter what stage you're at. We have over 641 episodes, so feel free to peruse those episodes, and you're bound to find something of interest. Today's episode, I say today's episode, but this is literally releasing this back to back, or we're doing 2 episodes today. No reason why, just trying to get some out there. So maybe I could take a little bit of time off on a Friday. But anyways, today's episode is with Camille Freeman, and this is the Herbalist Hour. And yeah, I was really excited to talk to Camille. We've had a lot of back and forth over the years. Then it occurred to me that we've never actually had a conversation, whether via Zoom or in person or by phone or whatever. So it was nice to get to know Camille. She dropped a lot of herbal gems, if you will, and I know you'll have a lot of takeaways. So be sure to learn more about Camille at CamilleFreeman.com. We also talk about this in the show, but you could follow her on LinkedIn. I believe that's her only social media, so check her out on LinkedIn or CamilleFreeman.com. And yeah, she's got a lot of great projects going on. Also wanted to let you know that if you'd like to join us live for these Herbalist Hour conversations, our Herb Rally Schoolhouse members are able to. So if you'd like to become an Herb Rally Schoolhouse member, it's only $10 a month, and it's one of the best ways you can help support the show and the YouTube channel and everything else we do here at Herb Rally. You can also get your first 30 days for free with coupon code podcast at checkout. And you can learn more about that at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And again, yeah, we've been letting people join us live for our Zoom interviews. Not the in-person ones, at least yet, because we don't really know how to do that yet. But yeah, the Zoom interviews, you're welcome to join us, ask questions, and interact. But you can also catch the videos to these after the fact, along with the podcast, but then also our YouTube channel. So go ahead and head to youtube.com/c/herbrally, hit that subscribe button. We come out with anywhere from 1 to 3, sometimes more, herbalism videos per week. And if you like the podcast, you're definitely going to love the YouTube channel as well. So that's going to do it for me today, for real this time, and hope you enjoy this Herbalist Hour episode with Camille Freeman, and I'll talk to you later. Take care. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm joined by Camille Freeman. Welcome to the show, Camille.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Happy to have you. I've always been curious about you. What's kind of your herbal lineage? Where did you get your start? And who were some of your teachers?
Yeah, so I actually got my start in my 10th grade English class. We had to do a writing project, and my English teacher knew that I had an interest in sort of holistic things, and she recommended that I do a project on echinacea. And this was in the olden days before the internet was what it is. And so I did this year-long project on echinacea, which involved me writing off to Jim Duke. I wrote him an actual letter, and
Whoa.
I sent off for copies of Herbalgram that came in the mail, and that, I went through the card catalog at the library. So I did all that, and I was really interested in echinacea, but I had no idea that herbalism was a field. And I was listening to your podcast with Kiva the other day, and I was like, oh yeah, similar. I had no idea that that was a possibility. So then I went to college, and after that, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I found out about naturopathic school, and I was like, oh, that could be interesting. But then I looked into it, and I was like, oh, it's a lot of money. And the only only classes I'm interested in are the herb ones. So I was like,
Right.
how about no? And and then I was driving across the country. I was living in Orcas Island at the time, out off the coast of Washington. And I was going across the country. I stopped in New Mexico because I thought I might want to go to massage school there. And there was a farmer's market, and there was this table, and it said herbalist apprentice wanted. And that was, I think, the first time I ever heard of an herbalist. And I became the apprentice.
Wow.
That was Monica Rude, who lives in Silver City, New Mexico. And she makes fire cider, salves, things like that. So I lived on her farm as an apprentice in a plastic yurt which in New Mexico in the summer is, quite an adventure.
That sounds brutal.
Brutal, but we weren't inside. We were hardly inside at all during the day. So, it's fine. But yeah, I apprenticed on her farm, and we did lots of growing, medicine making. We would, she's a Michael Moore person.
Sure.
So a lot of that type of training. And then right when that was wrapping up, I was like, oh, I want to know more about clinical, how to actually recommend these herbs to people. And that's when the master's degree in herbal medicine opened up at Tai Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
So then I moved there, and Jim Duke was part of that program. So it was sort of like a full circle moment for me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is, his garden was right a mile or two away from their campus, and he was on the faculty. And so I got to be really good friends with Jim, and
wow.
I went to school there and became an herbalist, started practicing clinically at that point.
Wow. Okay. I had no idea Jim Duke was a part of Tai Sophia, which is now Maryland University of Integrative Health. Is that where you met Bevan Clare?
Yes.
Okay.
So I went to school there, and when I was going through it, Simon Mills was the program director. And so was really heavily influenced by his lineage and tradition, as well as James Snow and Kevin Smellman. So they were kind of the core faculty in my day.
Wow.
And then after that, I got another master's degree in physiology and biophysics because I wanted to know more about the body.
Yep.
And eventually I got hired onto the faculty, and Bevan was also on the faculty. So we shared an office along with Andrew Pengelly, and we had babies at the same time. So there were times when our single office was full of, chew toys and baby mats and diapers and this sort of thing. James Snow was our director, and all three of us had babies within a few months of each other, and it was chaos. It was chaos for a little while. It's a lot of breastfeeding, a lot of spit up, all the things.
Well, it's a little foreshadowing. I actually got a video question from Bevan Clare for you, but we'll bring that up later on in the episode. I'm curious, as Tai Sophia, aka MUIH, where you also got your nutrition background, because a lot of times I'll say, the clinical herbalist that I know act as a, say, dietitian or nutritionist in some way. My path to getting into herbalism was an interest in nutrition. So yeah, I guess it's a couple part question. Where did you get your nutrition background, and do you kind of feel like you are primarily a nutritionist and a herbalist on the side?
Yes, in a lot of ways, I feel like a nutrition imposter because I backed into it from herbalism, really.
Okay.
At the time when I got my master's degree, the state of Maryland had basically, because they considered herbs a subset of nutrition, they're dietary supplements, technically, they counted that as a relevant degree. And so I was able to basically qualify. I had to get 1,000 hours of experience and take their exam, but I was able to qualify for a license with just that degree, which is great. It helped me in some ways. I'm not a huge fan of licensing for herbalists, but in terms of having that sort of medical credential, it has opened up some doors for me. And then I basically just recently went back and got a doctorate in nutrition from MUIH, mainly because I had been working there for 10 years. And after 10 years, you can take classes for free. So it was,
wow, that's cool.
It was a free doctorate. And so I was like, why don't I do
not?
that? So convenient when you're, working and homeschooling and pandemicking.
Sure.
But anyway, that's fine. So yeah, I did that. But basically my nutrition, I am a nutritionist technically, but I am, I am sort of bare bones. Like, let's just eat as well as we can. Like, let's eat the best foods that we can work into our diets. Let's just make sure people are getting enough plants. Let's check the protein. It's very, fundamental is my approach to nutrition. I don't do a lot of nitpicking, let's just say.
Okay. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but we have a course called The Art of Frugal Nutrition. So I want to get to this later about the heart-based model that you talk about, pricing structure and whatnot. So The Art of Frugal Nutrition is a sliding scale course, and it actually slides all the way down to free. We felt like it would be kind of hypocritical if we were charging a lot of money for this course where we're trying to help people save money on food. But yeah, it's just more of a passion project or anything. So far what we have is fermentation, dumpster diving, the Spice Apothecary with Bev and Claire, actually, Eat Your Weeds with Shayna Lipner Grover, and then we just released one on nourishing herbal infusions with Bridget Dougherty. And I'm just kind of curious, with that background, knowing that, are there any maybe potential future modules that you could think of right off the top of your head, as far as like another way to incorporate nutrition in your life without spending a lot of money?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think about is just if you are, eating a frugal diet, is just double checking that you're meeting your nutritional needs. Mm-hmm. Because to me, that's one of the things. It's like, oh, okay. The issue with nutrition is that sometimes these things don't show up for a long time. And so if you're not, if you don't have a certain amount of diversity in your diet, or, reaching protein thresholds, especially for people who are pregnant or growing, or, recovering from chronic illness or whatever else. So I think that could be interesting to explore. Like, how do you make sure that you're, getting your diversity and meeting some basic nutritional needs while also staying like very, budget conscious?
Absolutely.
Can be cool.
Yeah. I left one out. I don't think I mentioned bone broth. Maybe I did say that, but that's in there as well, because you're essentially cooking the scraps that you might have tossed anyway. So what's more frugal than free? Totally. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but earlier today I was listening to your podcast about the power of showing up. And I was just wondering, I really enjoyed that episode. By the way, dear listener, pause the episode right now and go hit subscribe on In the Clinic with Camille Freeman. Most of your episodes, I want to say, are like kind of these 10-minute short bursts of just information packed, but you make it so very digestible. So yeah, definitely go subscribe to In the Clinic with Camille Freeman. But yeah, I just listened to an episode all about the power of showing up, and I kind of wonder if you want to go on a little diatribe about that for our audience.
Yeah, totally. I do. I feel really strongly on this topic. So the gist of the episode is that, especially in the current day and age, there's so many cool things going on online that you can sign up for. So many, programs and classes and webinars and trainings and all these things. And it's really easy, I think, to sign up for them and then never go, and just store them away for later, like your little squirrel, stashing them away just in case you need them. And I think there's some value in that, especially if you think, oh, I really definitely want to know this and I just can't go right now.
Right.
But I also think there's just so much value in showing up live and being there in real time. And it's not just to sort of assuage the teacher's insecurities, it's which is a part of it. But when you are there live, there's a different type of interaction. You're not just consuming, you're engaging. And to me, that's a very different energetic of, are you participating? Are you building community? Are you connecting with not just the teacher, but the other people who are there? Are you like showing your face and making yourself known? And that's so different than like listening to it on 2X as you fall asleep that night. It's like a totally different thing. And, I get a lot of questions from people that are like, oh, how do I build my practice? How do I get referrals? How do I, tell people what I do? And I'm like, part of it is showing up to those kinds of things. Like if you're in a class, or if you're in the Herb Rally Schoolhouse and there's a live thing, or if you're taking a training on whatever, and there's a live component, or there's a community forum where you can show up. If you show up there consistently, even just like once a week, or occasionally leave a comment, write a note to the teacher or somebody you connected with, it makes such a huge difference. And that is how people remember you. And then they're like, oh yeah, I met that person in that class. I'm going to send somebody their way. It's not about you just somehow asking them. It's like you show up, you come to the surface of their consciousness. They know you, and that makes all the difference. So I think that's so important. And, as somebody who's taught classes with hundreds of people in them, sometimes it's surprising how few people will actually write back and say like, oh, that was great. Thank you so much. Or this is something I learned. Or even like I don't know if you've seen this on your newsletter or not, but you can have like thousands of people in your newsletter send something out, and not that many people write back and just say, oh, this was a great, great newsletter. This really helped me. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's only a small handful of people. So you're not nobody. You feel like, oh, maybe I'm just one of the crowd. It doesn't matter. Totally matters. If something helped you or served you or touched you, you just like write and tell the person that made a difference for me. It really, really matters.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. For the longest time with the Herb Rally podcast, I felt like I was just putting these episodes out into the void. And I don't think podcast is a very interactive medium per se, but yeah, it doesn't hurt to just say, when I say, oh, you can email me anytime, mason@herbrally.com, give me your feedback, constructive criticism, just say hi, and then never receive any sort of feedback. So it is very beneficial. Yeah. From the presenter's standpoint. Yeah. Just to receive that, I guess, validation. And I really want to highlight what you're talking about as far as building community. Shout out to Lydia, because every YouTube video that we publish, she's always saying like, hi, or just leaving a heart or this or that. And you know what? I went over to her YouTube channel. I gave her a subscribe, and now I feel like I kind of have a relationship with this person. And it really does it's not just an ego trip thing. Like, you need to tell me how well we're doing or whatever. But that does feel nice. But at the same time, I really do think it helps build community.
Yeah, it's a connection that Lydia didn't have before and you didn't have before. And now there's there's like that relationship, that network. I always think of it as like the roots underground that are interacting with each other and talking to each other and supporting each other. And that's how we build as a field and as a profession, is just like supporting each other.
Amen. That's what Herb Rally is all about. I wasn't going to originally ask you this, but I feel like your LinkedIn account is also really amazing. And so yeah, dear listener, go follow Camille on LinkedIn. But I did want to say, it almost seems as if you put out these thoughts that you have, and a lot of times they're like very profound. And then I realized after listening to your podcast, you almost kind of like combine the two. Like, you have this thought that you put out there on LinkedIn, and then you make like a 10-minute episode about that. Am I noticing that? Is that actually how you kind of do it?
Yeah, I don't have any kind of formula.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
I wish I could say there's a method here, but there is not. Yeah, so I think that what's most valuable to me about being on LinkedIn, though, is the like connection.
Yeah.
And so I'm not there really to promote things per
Right.
se, but
That's
it's
the
just
best.
like, oh, there's actually, it's kind of weird, but there's actually a bunch of cool herby people on LinkedIn that are
Yes.
interested in having, conversations and hearing what people are doing. And so I just try to show up there when I've got some time, and, it's just like a way to reach out and kind of reach out some tentacles and connect with some people. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I want to say I'm kind of lazy with LinkedIn. I just kind of post what our most recent content is or whatever. But I really appreciate that you take the time to give a thoughtful, insight, and then put it out there for the world to read. And then you go more in depth on your podcast and whatnot. But earlier I was bringing up this whole pay from the heart model, and you were in your episode, you were kind of comparing it to a sliding scale type model, and I'm just kind of curious if you could expound upon that for the audience.
Yeah. So pay from the heart is a model that I learned from a mentor of mine, Mark Silver, who runs something called Heart of Business, which is not specifically for herbalists, but it is like sort of a marketing program for people who are heart-centered and don't want to do kind of gross marketing stuff. Mm-hmm. So I highly recommend his work. But anyway, Mark introduced me to this model, and I started applying it to my Monday mentoring program. And the idea is that, and I have tried over 15-ish years, I have tried so many different models, just, sliding scale, free clinic, all the different things. I've tried lots of bartering, all kinds of things. And what I found with sliding scale is that it's so hard for people to place themselves. And there's so much guilt about like, oh, what's the difference between 30 and 35? And like, how do I decide which one of those, and versus 0 versus 75? It's like overwhelming, especially when people are already in a little bit of a crisis mode where they need help. It can be really hard to make that decision, and to the point where it, I think, is a barrier for some people to even sign up. So what Pay from the Heart does is it's similar, but essentially you give people a certain number of choices and you explain what those choices are. So for example, you say, here is the minimum viable price for this program that just basically keeps the lights on.
Mm-hmm.
Here is the price that allows us to not just do the minimum, but to pay the people who are involved a sustainable wage and, kind of have a slightly higher standard of living for the people who are involved. And then here is the price that allows us to open up access for people who can't afford even the lowest price, expand our programs, grow, et cetera. And you just say, here's these 3 levels, you choose.
Yeah.
And there's no discussion. It's like you just place yourself where you want to be, pick one of them and sign up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pay from the heart. And it's not about there's not necessarily criteria for each one. It's just like, okay, if this is what's affordable for you and you understand that that is sort of like the minimum and that's where you are, then awesome. And then if the middle one feels more reasonable to you, great. And so forth. And anyway, so I like the simplicity of it. I also found that the exercise for me of going through and being like, well, if I'm going to do that model, I need to know what is the minimum price, which is, the finances are hard to sometimes look at.
Yeah.
So it's helpful for me to just be like, okay, I want to know what it is. Yeah. And at first I was like, oh, nobody, everybody's just going to pay the lowest price, which is fine. Like I get it.
Right.
And that's not what happens at all.
Wow.
Like a lot of people pay the minimum price, but there are lots of people who pay the middle and a handful of people who pay the highest tier as well. And I feel like the more financially stable I become in this work, the more I also want to support, like if I were signing up for a program like that, I would want to sign up for at least the middle, if not the highest, if I could afford it. And so I do think that, sometimes it's easy to just assess it from where we would be.
Right.
And be like, well, why would anybody pay the higher price? But then it's like, oh no, circumstances are different. People have different things. And I think there is actually a lot of value in putting the energy into saying like, oh, I want to be somebody who supports fair wages. I want to be somebody who does this if it's accessible to me. And so I love that.
Yeah, I love how you put that. It got me thinking. I'm like, I should probably have some sort of tiered system for the Herb Rally Schoolhouse too, because it's one of the ways me and Amanda are trying to help support our family and so I'm going to look into that more. You mentioned you actually took some sort of like business course, and I just interviewed Rosalie De La Forêt maybe a couple weeks back, and we both talked about the importance of investing in, say, marketing courses or business courses. And it sounds kind of like antithetical to like the herbalist lifestyle. It almost seems like they don't go hand in hand, but we both kind of agreed that educating yourself on being a better, I guess, business person is extremely helpful for you and your practice. So I'm just curious, would you kind of offer the same advice to herbalists out there?
I would. And I think it's not, we don't always perceive it as fun.
Yeah.
Trying to figure this stuff out. But it's not taught. This is not something you're born knowing. And so if you want to support yourself with this work, you need to learn from somebody who knows how to do it. Yeah. Or who can at least be a mentor for you, because it's not something that's just intuitive. You're going to like go outside and somehow know how to do this. So for me, one of the most valuable things has been having a mentor who knows what they're doing. Right. Where I can just be like, hey, I'm thinking about this. And she will sometimes be like, Camille, that is a terrible idea. You're totally overwhelmed. You have no time already. Why are you trying to do a new program? And then other times she'll be like, no, that's great. Let's talk about how it's going to fit into your vision and all this stuff. But that outside objective look, especially if somebody who does have some training in marketing, especially if it's ethical and they understand the values and where you're coming from, as opposed to like, oh, it's not like money at all costs, but it is right. Like, I want to support myself and my family. And it's not always obvious how to do that.
Just a quick break from the show to let you know about our sliding scale, ever-expanding course called The Art of Frugal Nutrition. The goal of this course is to teach you how to eat nourishing foods on a budget. As I mentioned, it's a sliding scale, and it even slides all the way down to free. And what's more frugal than free? We add new modules with highly esteemed herbalists and nutritionists every few months. so it continues to grow, as with most projects here at Herb Rally. If you'd like to learn more and register, head to herbrally.com/frugal nutrition. One more time, that's herbrally.com/frugal nutrition. All right, now back to the show. Can you repeat the name of, was his name Robert or?
Mark Silver.
I don't know where you got Robert from.
That's okay. I mean, just sort of the generic men's name. Mark Silver. It's called Heart of Business, and I did take his. He has a learning community that I was part of for quite a while, and I really enjoyed it. And it is a Sufi based.
Oh, cool.
You don't have to be Sufi.
Right.
He welcomes people from all religions, but if that's a problem for people, it's not going to be the best fit. But he's really lovely. He has lots of free videos and stuff online, so you can get a feel for if he's your type of person. Cup of tea.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds perfect kind of for the herbal community. If your brand is like heart-centered, that sounds like it goes hand in hand perfectly. But we talked about the schoolhouse, we talked about business mentorships, but I know you have a mentorship as well. I want to say off the top of my head, it's called Monday Mentorship.
Monday Mentoring.
Right? Monday Mentoring.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell our audience more about that?
Yeah. So Monday Mentoring is it's a community of practice, which I love this concept of a community of practice, which is basically a group of people who are all interested in the same problem or interest topic and come together in order to engage in that practice or topic more fully together. Like basically the sum is greater than the individual parts. That's
Sure.
the concept. So it was born out of my own needs or desires. Essentially, I took some time off my clinical practice after my second child was born. There's just only so much one person can do. And so I wanted to come back after a while, and I started practicing, and I was like, well, it's kind of lonely out here. I didn't have a community of people where I could be like, hey, this isn't going as I thought it would. What would you do here? Like if you've tried all the normal things and those things are not working, or what do you do if somebody cancels 3 times in a row and then reschedules, or, these types of questions that come up. And it's good to have people who are actually doing the thing to say, oh, well, that's happened to me, or here's what I would do. So I just basically put out some feelers and got together a small group of people. I just cleaned up my office yesterday, and I found there was a Post-it note that I wrote when I was coming up with this idea. And I had written down like Monday Mentoring ? And then the goal was 10 people.
Wow.
And that was the first. So I had 12 people actually sign up, and we would get together once a week for an hour and just share cases, share, business things, like how do you find more clients, and what do you do if the person doesn't sign the form, or, all the things. And then it kind of grew. It grew from there, and it got to where we didn't really fit in 1 hour a week. So now we have 3 hours a week every Monday, and people sign up. And basically it's designed to be, the core of it is you just show up live for an hour a week and engage with other people doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea. So we're trying to be not complicated. It's not like 18 forums and you post this and you do that. It's really just like, just show up and be with people who are also engaged in this practice for an hour a week, and you're going to grow, and you're going to, expand and build community and all of that.
So is that done via Zoom?
Yeah, every Monday we have a session at noon, one at 5, and one at 7.
Oh, wow.
So people can come to one, or they can come to, I recommend just trying to come to one, but you can come to all of them. And what we do is we sort of rotate through. We have round tables where we talk about cases. We have training classes, which are my deep dive. I'll do a lecture basically on a specific topic once a month. We have practice management, where we talk about, running money, running things,
Sure.
websites, all this stuff. Stasha Stahl comes in and does an apothecary class once a month, where people talk about, I don't run an apothecary, so I don't teach that one or facilitate it, but Stasha does. And they're amazing. So Stasha will go through, any questions about harvesting and preparing and shipping and all that kind of stuff. And so we just kind of rotate through those classes, and people can pick, if you aren't interested in apothecary, you can just go to another one. And that's how it goes. So we just do that every Monday, and it's great. We're every time I facilitate a session, I'm just so grateful of how many really cool, thoughtful, committed people are doing this work and showing up for each other. It's really very fun.
That sounds like just an amazing experience. Are you at all 3 sessions every Monday?
I am at most of them, but not all of
Wow.
them.
Okay. I was going to say that'd be a very busy Monday for you.
Yeah. At the beginning, I did all of them. And now I've hired some not guests, I mean, they come regularly, but I've got other folks who come in and do facilitations. So right now I'm at probably half to 75% of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have other facilitators for 25-ish% of them.
Okay. Right on. Well, where can people learn more about that and sign up? I believe it's a closed cart as of this second. Is that true? Or
yeah, we open 3 times a year. So September will be the next one, January, and then kind of late spring. People are like dying to get in right this very second. I could probably help them out, but for the most part, we do those windows. It's just CamilleFreeman.com/Monday mentoring.
Awesome. But shifting gears a little bit, I know I don't typically ask this question anymore, but I thought you'd be a great person to ask because you had a whole episode about the books you recommend to herbalists. Because, a lot of people might say the same books and whatnot, but I know you have a lot of great recommendations. So what are some books you'd recommend to, say, herbalists or clinical herbalists?
Yes. Well, it depends. I always like to preface this by saying that it's so tempting to just go out and buy all the books, right?
Totally. Just like all the courses too.
All the books, all the courses. And I think in some ways it's better to just buy a couple and really like dive through them, learn a lot from those few. And then when you feel like, okay, I've absorbed that, then maybe expand to another reference text that fills a need for you personally. So I think it's like the learning component sometimes keeps people from doing the practicing, where it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to learn this one more thing before I start seeing clients or before I promote myself, and then I'll be ready. And I'm like, no, you need to take what you already know, practice, use it, and then see like, oh, I wish I knew more about X, Y, or Z, and then buy a book that helps you meet that need instead of just like, once I get through all the books in the world about herbs, then I'll be ready to start practicing. So that's the caveat to this answer. Can
I comment on that caveat first? I feel like that's just good life advice in general, not just for books and herbalism. I remember in my early 20s, I was obsessed with, say, spirituality and meditating and fasting and reading about spirituality. And I just kept going down this that spiral. And it was fine. It was probably very useful for my evolution and who I am today. But at the same time, I felt like I was lacking something because I wasn't actually doing anything. You know what I mean? And then it finally occurred to me, ironically, by reading another book about spirituality, they were saying, go find your place in the world by doing actual work. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's time to stop consuming. It's time to start like sharing and teaching and presenting. And so yeah, I just want to comment like that's totally true about life in general, including the reading books about herbalism. So.
Yeah. And I've heard people talk about that cycle as the sort of consumption creation cycle. And it's like the inhale and the exhale, like you need to balance them. So if you're only creating and putting things out without, taking some things in, then you do wind up sort of in a bubble. But if you're only taking things in and never creating, that you're also off balance. So I think it's got to be a little of both.
That's a good point. Yeah, because you don't want to just stop learning,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I have seen some people, you get to where you suddenly think of like, oh, I've been doing this for so long, now I'm an expert. I'm
right.
Like, well, there's always more to learn. Things change.
Absolutely.
So that was a long-winded answer that I haven't actually responded to yet, but I'm just looking at my bookshelf here. So part of this is like, oh, well, there's some books that I've internalized so much that I don't use them anymore, which is hard because I'm like, they're still really important to me, but I don't actually work with them because they're just part of what I'm doing.
Totally.
But right now, the big ones that I'm turning to a lot are Krista Sinodinos's Essential Guide to Western, but is it botanical medicine or herbal medicine? One of those.
Essential Guide to Western Botanical Medicine, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that book. It's especially for herbs that I know about, but maybe haven't worked with quite a lot. I feel like it's a really great way to brush up on it. And one of the reasons I love that book so much is that I feel like a lot of books sort of compile information where it's like, oh, the eclectics said this, and Culpeper said this, and David Hoffman said this. But there's not that many books that are like, and here's what I have found. And for me, that's the jewel. Like somebody who's been practicing for a long time and is sharing their own reflections and experiences. Those are the kind of books where I'm like, oh, I want that because I know what I've been seeing, but I can read up on the eclectics and all those things myself, but I want to know, what have you learned from all of this? So for me, that's really, those are the tidbits that are really, really helpful.
Yeah, we were visiting with Paul Bergner April of last year, and I want to say he talked to us for probably about 30 minutes about how much he loved that book by Krista. So I'll include a link to that in the show notes. I'll also include a link to a 10-minute video that we produced with Krista where she kind of talks about the book and what's inside and all that. So yeah, it's a big beefy book.
It is. It's a big beefy book. I just refiled it because I usually have it out on my desk. It's really pretty too. There's lots of plant pictures. I also like Jill Stansberry's formulary series. Again, it's based on her clinical experience. And so for me, again, that's just gold. Where I am in my practice is just hearing from other experienced herbalists about, and then some of my other favorites, it's ridiculous, but I do love a good medical textbook. So ridiculous. But I really love physiology. And so when I'm teaching a deep dive, what I do, like last year we did the gastrointestinal deep dive, and this year we're doing a hormone deep dive. So what I do is I go and I find out like what is the go-to textbook for gastroenterologists? Like what is their Bible essentially? And then I buy it. And then I read it because I want to know, like, what do we know about how the system works? It doesn't have anything about herbs, but I can get a lot from just, what is our current understanding about these things? I can apply that to what I know about herbs and layer the two together. And that, for me, it's really helpful.
How important is anatomy and physiology education for the herbalist? And do you have any recommendations how, besides like saying getting a good textbook, how an herbalist could go about learning A&P?
Yeah. Well, I feel kind of torn on this because I think it's depending on the type of herbalism you're practicing, it may have more or less importance. Yeah. The way that I practice, it's really, really important. I think everybody needs to have some basic understanding of, the major systems and, for safety purposes and so forth. But I think there's plenty of people who were practicing a very different type of herbalism where it may not be front and center for them. And in that case, like awesome, Yeah. But if it is a real, especially I think if you want to be evolving as a practitioner, we need to say like, what we understand about the system has changed. Like we now know things that we didn't know before. And so how do we adapt to that? And how do we speak with other practitioners who are using this language and who do have this understanding? So how do you learn about it? Well, Tammy Sweet, I know, has some great foundational A&P for, herbalists. So I think that course would be a great place to start. For more advanced people, I do in my deep dives. Those really take a single thing and go into them. So for example, we have, one about GERD and one about IBS and those types of things, but it's not a, comprehensive course about the whole of the body.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think part of it is just as things come up for you, you can take a deep dive into them. You have your first client who has diverticulosis and you're like, what is that? So then you go and you look it up and you look at some papers and you ask around and you see where you see it in textbooks and you start to piece it together like that. The problem is, of course, there's so many wackadoodles out there. You go down the Google rabbit hole, you might find yourself in an interesting position. So that's the hard part.
So just to bring it back to your Monday group, is that something where, say, a beginning herbalist, if they did have to deal with diverticulitis, they'd never heard of it before, is that where they could approach the group and be like, what do you think about this? And then, get some mentorship around that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Monday mentoring also includes all of my webinars ever. And
Oh,
so
awesome.
a lot of times there is a webinar they can watch. I have a lot of people who are, if you're like, oh, I have a client coming in who has this, they just look and see, is there a webinar on it? And it'll at least give them a foundation.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of, here's the herb you should give, because as we know, that's not
Right.
how herbs work.
Yeah.
But at least
Totally.
give you some ideas about how do we approach this.
I did want to underline also when you said you may not use physiology in your methodology of practicing herbalism. And I appreciate that you said that, because there's all different ways that people practice herbalism. It's not always going to be, say, like this traditional Western herbalism standpoint. So thank you for bringing that up. Speaking of books, I was curious, and forgive me if you already have published a book, but I'm curious if you have, and if not, are you ever going to write a book?
It's so funny. I have not published a book, and I just had a meeting with my mentor last week, and she was like, Camille, you need to publish a book. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So here's the universe. Yeah, I have not. And I've been thinking about it. And I'm going back and forth, but one of the perhaps the needs or desires that I see out there is just a book about the first year in clinical practice. So I've thought about doing that, just like all of the things that come up about, like, how do you find clients, and how do you trust yourself, and how do you know when to get help, and how do you know what to do to when hard things happen, and all those types of issues. So I'm toying with that idea. I've toyed with I have this vision. I also am a professor at a university, and one of the things I'm really into in that work is open educational resources. Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay. So it's a whole thing in the higher education field. And the idea is that textbooks are oftentimes ridiculously expensive. I mean, hundreds of dollars for something people are going to use for 3 months and then resell for a quarter of the price.
Yeah, they'll come out with a new one next year. And
yes, exactly.
Slightly updated, yeah.
You can't use the old one, of course.
Right.
And so the idea is that that's not equitable. It's not supporting learning, et cetera. And so there's this movement of open textbooks, which are free, published online for anyone to access, for anyone to use. And, they're peer reviewed. They're written by experts in the field. So there's like a whole sort of branch of education that's been working on providing these resources for people. And I just find I've actually worked on one that we use in my physiology course that I teach at the university, again, because it's like people come in the first week and they don't have their student loans yet. All of a sudden they're behind because they haven't been able to afford the book, all this stuff. You're like, oh no, it's free. Here it is. Here's the link to the textbook. I can give it you can see it, and anybody can see the link to this textbook. And use it if they want. And so it's been such a game changer for me. It's an incredible amount of work, but still, I also have this dream that, herbalism is, as we always say, it's the people's medicine. And I would love to create kind of an open access herbal book where many herbalists could work together on a textbook type of thing that newer herbalists or anybody could access, that has, like accurate information about a variety of different herbs that could be updated as the need arises and as more information comes in. So it's a huge project. It's free to the reader, but not free in terms of the time spent and the hosting and all that kind of stuff.
Totally.
But I just think it fits so much with the vision of herbalism and getting access to this information out there. So that's something I would love to work on.
It almost sounds kind of like a Wikipedia for herbalists in a way.
Yeah.
So is this something you're actually highly considering spearheading, or is this still kind of living in the idea phase right now?
Yeah, I'm in the idea phase, but it is it's high on the list of the idea.
Really?
Phase. Mm-hmm.
Have you chatted with some of your peers about helping out with the project?
No, I mean, I'm sure I could rope Bevan into it, but anyway.
Well, this is a call out. Like this is being recorded right now, so it's in the ether now. So
there it is.
I'm curious. Personally, do you use any sort of project management software to keep yourself organized?
Oh, Mason. What have you done? What have you done? Yes, I I'm a little bit of a I'm a little bit of a project management type of nerd.
Yeah,
I like to.
I knew I could count on you for this. How'd I know?
Oh no. Oh no. Yes, I've worked with a variety of options because I think part of the issue is finding one that works the way your brain works.
Sure,
And,
totally.
and there are a lot of really popular ones that my brain just does not like. I try and I'm like, it's not clicking.
Yeah,
It's not flowing for me. So for example, Notion, I want to love Notion so
totally.
badly. I want to, and I do not.
Yeah.
And it's free and it's so pretty. And
Yeah.
I just cannot make my brain. I've tried so hard. It's just
Yeah.
not going to work for me. So right now I'm kind of in a weird place in my practice because I have just hired some people to help me with my inbox, which is a very, that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah.
Anyway, but so I need something where I can kind of communicate with other people as opposed to just something that works for me. And so I have been using something called Upbase, which I'm actually really, really loving. And it's a kind of project management calendar scheduling thing. So I keep in there all of my documents about like how to do all the things, like how to update a page on my website and how to reply when somebody loses the link to log in and how to reply, all those, all the little things that people need help with. So it all just lives in there. And then, I can be like, here's what I need you to do this, and I'm going to do this. And so that it works for me, and it's very affordable. So I'm really, it's like a obscure one. It's not a big Notion or Airtable or whatever else, but it is the one that works the way my brain works. And so that's what I'm doing.
It may seem like an unrelated question since this is like an herbalism show, but I really think it's super valuable to have some sort of project management software. So if you're like struggling to stay organized and keep moving forward with various projects you're trying to keep moving, I highly recommend looking into a project management software. And Camille's tip on getting one that works for your brain is super useful, because a lot of these project management softwares have, say, like free trials. So you could try different ones and then see which one clicks almost immediately. We were on Reich for years. And now we switched over to Asana for reasons I won't get into right now, but Asana is actually simpler than Reich in my opinion, and I'm really enjoying it. And it's really works for my brain. So so thank you for sharing that. I want to play you Bevan Claire's question now.
Hey Camille, this is Bevan, and I have a question for you. So let's say you are hired by a major publication like Vogue or Time magazine or something like that for the cover article, and your job is to promote one herb that you think everybody should be taking. And there's no way to get out of this. Like, you just have to pick one. What herb are you going to go on there and tell the huge public that everyone should be taking this herb and to go out and get it today? So what would you choose?
This is a very hard one because I can't have a favorite herb, obviously. That's not going to happen. But I might be tempted to write about dandelion because I feel like even if you aren't eligible or interested in, using dandelion as a, internal type of herb, there's still value in knowing about it. People are going to see it out and about, and there's so much to know. So I feel like if I'm having to write a big old article on something, I think dandelion is probably what I'm going with.
I love that answer. That's the Herb Rally logo. I also call it my gateway herb. It brought me into the world of herbalism. So great choice. That's probably what I'd choose as well. Or maybe oats might be a runner up, but no one's asking me. So Bevan asked you. So
well, I think we have consensus. So that seems good.
There you go. I really liked this podcast episode you did about no one knows what they're doing. So kind of like previously in this episode, I'm asking you to do these like diatribes about, specific episodes you've done. Can you kind of speak to no one knows what they're doing? If you recall what that episode was about.
I do. I was just thinking about this on a walk yesterday. it has to do with adulting also, I think. I don't know if you've ever had that moment where something happens and you're like, surely there's someone here who knows how to deal with this. And you're like, no, it's me.
It's got to be me.
You're like, huh, I am the adult in the room now. And it's, I think when it comes to business stuff, it can feel like that. Like, oh, somebody else knows how to do this, and I should just find the person that knows how to do this and get them to tell me how to do it. And at a certain point, you realize, oh, wait, they don't know how to do this any more than I know how to do this. I just need to make a decision and to do my best and try it. So I think that's a threshold for people who are going into either clinical practice or any kind of herbal business, is that at a certain point, it's you taking the reins and being like, there isn't somebody who knows better than I do about how to do this. And when you realize everybody else is just making it up, then it's like, oh, and I've thought about having you come on my podcast. That's a different conversation, but
Sure.
To talk about when you started out, you probably weren't like, oh, well, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to have the Herb Rally Schoolhouse, and then we're going to do this. It's like it evolves. You take the first step, and then the next right thing comes along and it turns into something. But most people didn't start out to sort of like do one thing and then just walk in a straight path toward the thing. And so I think that's where it comes in. It's like, oh, there's not a path for you to walk on. You're like, what is the next step? And then that becomes the path. And it's hard to understand that in the beginning, because it seems like everybody knows what they're doing.
Oh yeah, again, you're dropping gems here, Camille, and this really kind of relates to just everyday life in general. I would love to come on your podcast and talk about that too, because I remember early on, I felt like I had everything perfect in my head before I started, like I had to have everything figured out. But then it occurred to me, oh, just start and then iterate and then improve and change and evolve, and now Herb Rally is what it is today, and I want to just keep doing it and keep progressively getting better and better. I remember someone said an analogy one time about, let's say you're at your driveway and you have to get all the way to the other side of town. You're not going to wait for all of the streetlights to turn green in order to get there. You got to kind of go and then stop and then go and then stop. And you can't just get there in one fell swoop. You have to like do the steps along the way. And that's where the learning comes into play. So that's a really great answer. I got to ask this one. Do you have any, if I were to ask you, this is an audience question, if I were to ask you, what does the herbalism industry need most right now besides more herbalists? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do have a thought on that. And I think for me, it's broad scale education of the public to have an understanding of what an herbalist is. That is the big piece. It's like that. People don't know, and therefore it's very challenging. Like, as an herbalist, you not only have to be really great at working with herbs and people and all this, but you have to educate people about why they would want an herbalist. And I think if we had a bigger understanding of what we have to offer, so that people knew that they wanted an herbalist and could just look for one that was a good fit, that would be amazing. And I'll just say one more thing, which is part of me is like, oh, that's such a big, like, it seems like, oh, that could never really happen and all this. But then I'm like, look at these life coaches. 10 years ago, nobody had any clue what a life coach was. And now it's like everybody and their brother has a life coach. I don't personally, but I'm saying I know what it is. And I'm like, they have like a 6-month training. And not, again, love everybody do themselves. But I'm saying, like, there's been a whole revolution in the way people understand that. I'm like, it's possible. Herbalism is at least equally as valuable, if not much more helpful for a lot of people. Like, there's no reason that we can't have widespread understanding of what we have to offer.
That's a really great answer. I never thought of that one before. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, I'm starting to ask this question. What is something that you like doing? What's a hobby of yours that's totally outside of the realm of herbalism and plants and all that?
Okay, totally outside the realm.
You know what? I asked Susan Leopold this question too, and I wasn't as strict with her. She said she likes climbing trees and reading books about plants. So I was like, I guess that counts too.
You're like, it's related.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that I like doing, I think books, that's reading is my downtime thing that I like to do. So I like to curl up in the sun or the shade and read a book. It's my big thing.
So you're actually reading a physical book versus, say, an audiobook.
I do audiobooks sometimes, especially when I'm driving in the car, and I have a Kindle. I don't love supporting Amazon, but I do it. And and I have so many physical books. I think I buy them as like a therapy, basically. I'm like very ambitious in my purchasing of books.
Right on.
But I have a big pile.
I've essentially reverted completely over to audiobooks and, podcasts and whatnot. I'm like, man, I miss the good old days when I used to just curl up and read a book. And I'm trying to I'm carrying a physical book with me now in my backpack, and I'm like trying to get myself back in the habit. So it is a very relaxing activity. So wrapping up here, we've been asking this question to end the show, and then we'll kind of ask, where to learn more about you and whatnot. But what is your big why, and what keeps you learning and growing as far as like practicing herbalism and sharing it with the world?
Yeah, I think my big why is helping people who want to be an herbalist feel like it's possible. Because I think so many people want to do this work, and then they start down the path and it's hard. And it's so easy to get to that point and be like, oh, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not cut out for it. Maybe I'm, blah, blah, blah. There's all the reasons. Yeah. And it's so easy to just sort of turn around or pivot and be like, well, and I'm like, no. We can do this. So I feel like that's really why I'm here, is to help people continue down the path and like, well, let's keep growing. Let's keep trying. Let's keep showing up. Let's keep doing this for the sake of the people we can help and the planet who needs this medicine so much and all of that. I'm like, but we got to get people past that first stage where they've graduated or they've done the thing. And now you're sort of out there on your own, like, it's hard. It's really hard. And you don't have some of the things you need. And again, I feel like everybody else knows what they're doing. And so for me, I'm like, that's where I want to come in and like be that hand on the back that helps people keep going if that's what they want to do.
I think you're really doing it too. I mean, just looking at your website, your offerings, you've been kind enough to offer up free podcast episodes for the Herb Rally podcast, say like a intro to your hormonal deep dive, and you always just make it so approachable. And as I mentioned earlier, just digestible, these complex topics, and then just kind of your way of explaining it to the student is just I don't know. I just always really love hearing your teachings and whatnot. And I think you're really following your heart and your calling, and you're doing a really great job at it.
Oh, thanks.
And I really mean it. Like every time I Camille Freeman gets brought up, I'm like, oh, I just love working with her. And I hope people check out your website. That's CamilleFreeman.com. Like I mentioned earlier, follow you on LinkedIn, probably at Camille Freeman. I don't really know how they do those handles over there, but you're not on any other social media though, right? No. We'll stick with LinkedIn. Pretty high quality stuff there from Camille. And then also I want to say you have a newsletter as well. So how should people sign up for your newsletter?
Yeah, I have my practitioner notes. So it's for people who are herbalists or nutritionists. And it's just CamilleFreeman.com/newsletter. And it goes out most Thursdays. I send that out. Right
on. Well, very cool. Any closing thoughts or?
No, just thank you for all the work you're doing out here. And it's been really fun to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was asking you pre-show. I was like, wait, have we ever talked before? And I realized this might be our first time, besides lots of emails back and forth. So thank you so much, Camille, for joining us on the Herbalist Hour. Thanks y'all for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Herb Rally podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us here at Herb Rally, we now have a text message community, believe it or not. Basically, it's just updates from us. We send about 1 to 7 texts per week, notifying you about new events, videos, courses, podcasts. You get the idea. It's pretty much like our email newsletter, just in text form. So if you'd like to receive text messages from Herb Rally, just text JOIN, that's JOIN, to the number 541-256-2895. Again, that's JOIN to number 541-256-2895. And to stop receiving text, that's easy too. Just text STOP to the same number. It'll opt you out immediately. Okay, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your day.